For a child has been born for us, a son given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, there is a young woman is with child, and shall bear a son, and shall name him Emmanuel.
We're going to start out doing something a little different this morning. We're going to have a literature pop quiz this Sunday morning. So I want you to think about high school literature class. Some of you that has a shorter time to think about than others. I'm going to share with you a quote. And I want you to think about where that quote comes from. Who said it? What's going on? And don't tell anybody. But after I share it, whisper your answer to the person sitting next to you. Because everybody likes to be right. So if you're right, that person can go, "You're so smart. Good job remembering that." So you ready? Here's a quote. What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other word, would smell as sweet. Think about where that's from. Ready? I'll say it one more time. What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other word, would smell as sweet. It's Shakespeare. It's from Romeo and Juliet. I see some of you are like, it's Juliet that's speaking here. And it comes right after she says, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" She's speaking to Romeo himself. And she's mentioning the fact that no matter what his name is, she still loves him. People in this story are very hung up on names. Because names are important. That whole story, the whole star-crossed lovers bit, exists because their last names are different. Their last names show that they are from two families that are fighting against one another. Because names have power. Despite Juliet's agricultural sensibilities, names have power. And in the Bible, names do more than just show who your family is. They show who your God is. They show how that God is going to use those people. And how that God is changing the world through those people. Sometimes God changes people's name in the Bible. Literally changes their name. It says, "I'm going to use you to do something bigger than what your name meant, so you need a new name." Good example of that is Abram. Abram's name means exalted father. It's a pretty good name, but God wants a bigger name. God names him Abraham, which means the father of many. It's a good name for a man that all of God's people will list at the very top of their family tree. You have another man, Simon, one of Jesus' first disciples. And Jesus doesn't stick with the name Simon and starts to call him Peter almost immediately. Let me tell you what Simon means. Has two meanings. If Jesus and them are all speaking in Greek, then the name Simon means snub nose. Good job, parents. We're assuming that they spoke Hebrew. It's better. Simon's name means one who listens. But Jesus changes that name to Peter, which means rock. Because Jesus says, "You, Peter, are the rock on which I build my church." It is Peter who will later on start some of the first churches in the world. The first Christian churches. He will sustain them. He will help them to grow. So his name, Rock, has a significant meaning in what God is doing. You look at the name Isaiah, the man who said the words that we heard this morning a couple of times, that we shared together with Dr. Lofton. Isaiah's name means God is salvation, which is a fitting name for the man that God chose to share exactly how that salvation will happen. How God will save God's people through the birth of a child. This Sunday is the first Sunday in Advent. The term Advent is a word that means entrance. When we use it outside of the church, we talk about something that happens in history. That history changes after that moment. So we'll say things like, before the advent of the internet, or before the advent of cell phones or television. But in Christian life, in Christian churches, when we use the term Advent, it's a little bit bigger than internet, telephones, TV. We refer to the entrance of the greatest gift that mankind has ever received, God's own Son. It's a moment that changes history so significantly that how we measure time itself changed after that moment. Think about what year it is. It's 2017. It's 2017 because we've been counting ever since that moment. We are now 2017 years since the birth of a child in a stable brought the kingdom of heaven to earth. It's powerful. And that's what we wait. That's what we wait on at this time. This baby's name, 2017 years ago, is a name that's above all other names. And Jesus' name means two things. It means God saves. God is generous. Powerful names for God's only Son. But that's not the only name attributed to Jesus. You'll see on the front of our bulletin, there are 256 names by Billy Sundays here. And every single one of these names carries a significant meaning. So during this season of Advent, as we anticipate the birth of Jesus, we're going to be focusing on some of the names mentioned by the prophet Isaiah. Names spoken long before the name Jesus was sheep. Names like Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace, Emmanuel. Looking at these names and asking ourselves, what was meant by these when they were first spoken? How were these names heard? How are they heard now? And how does Jesus, even now, exemplify what these names reflect? So today we're going to talk about Wonderful Counselor. Now, in order to really understand what this name means, or any of those names mentioned by the prophet Isaiah, why this name is so significant, you got to understand what's going on when Isaiah first shared this list of names with God's people. Isaiah is living in the 8th century BC. This is about 800 years before the birth of Christ. And it's a time period that is critical to the people of God. They've just finished experiencing the ravages of war. Not a normal war, but a war with one another. They're fighting, and that fighting is finally ended, and they're picking up the pieces. They're also afraid because the looming shadow of a much bigger war is surrounding them. Assyria, this massive global empire, is gaining traction and gaining power and wanting to take over the very land that they occupy. And these people know that at any moment, that army could come charging in and attack them. And at the same time that all of that is happening, Isaiah is troubled, deeply, deeply troubled. Because when he looks around at his own people, at his own nation, here is what he sees. The powerful gaining more and more power. The wealthy gaining more and more wealth at the expense of those who have nothing. He's watching this every day. And God is calling him to be the voice of reason in that moment. when people read the Old Testament, I've often heard people say things like this. I don't know why I need to read that part of the Bible. It's so long ago. We are so modern now. The world is so radically different now. I can't relate to that. Think about what's happening at this time. Dealing with the aftermath of war, the pain and scars of war that are still present. Dealing with fear that a larger conflict would come from a country they don't understand. And the fact that there's an ever-growing gap between those who have and those who don't. I think that we have more than just a little bit of understanding of what that mindset is like in our modern world. It's at this time, when they're worried about all those things, that the king comes before the prophet and asks for God to send a sign. A sign that God is with them as they worry about this future war, as they struggle with social issues. A sign that God is listening, that God is there, that God knows how they're feeling. A sign that God is among them. I want you to hear now, knowing all of that, the prophet's response to that desire for a sign. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the virgins with child shall bear a son, and shall name him Emmanuel. For a child has been born for us, a son given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders. He's named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. In the middle of all this fear and struggle, Isaiah pronounces hope. Hope from God through the birth of a child, a king. I say a king because that's what these names are. These are not normal names. These are what are called throne names. They are the names that are spoken during a coronation before a king sits on their throne. They are the names that are yelled down the hallway before the king goes through the big wooden doors. That's what these names are, these throne names. And if you watch television, you might have heard throne names again and again and again. On Game of Thrones, here are some of the throne names on that show. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, first of her name. The Unburned, the Queen of the Andals, the Khaleesi of the Great Brass Sea, the Breaker of Chains, and the Mother of Dragons. That's quite an entrance. And it's not just for HBO television shows that we hear throne names. This is how Egyptian monarchs were announced. And this is exactly how Queen Elizabeth II of England right now is announced. Her throne names, it's a long list. And it changes depending on which country she visits. In Canada, Queen Elizabeth II's throne names are Her Majesty Elizabeth II, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom, Canada, and her other realms and territories, Queen, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith. That's a pretty good entrance. In New Zealand, they also had the White Heron. And I'm serious here. In Nebraska, of the United States, Nebraska, Queen Elizabeth has, in addition to that name, Admiral in the Great Navy of the state of Nebraska. That is actually a thing. You can look it up. The purpose of these names, these throne names, is not only to elevate a person, but to also elevate who that person serves. Even Queen Elizabeth, you see God thrown in there a lot. In the Bible, this is used to elevate God. When Isaiah is using these throne names, it is used to elevate God. It's a sign of how God will be and is working through this person. So as these people and their king struggle with what to do next, with the fear of war bearing down on them and the struggles of their people all around them, what they want, what they need, is someone to help them to decide what to do. They need an advisor, counselor. And Isaiah tells them that the baby that God's sending will be called Wonderful Counselor. Now, in some translations of the Bible, this throne name is divided. It's not just one name, it's two names. It's Wonderful, Counselor. Now, you can hear this reflected most powerfully, I think, in Handel's Messiah. I'm not going to sing this for you, but in Handel's Messiah, it is an abrupt stop between Wonderful and Counselor. And if you want to hear that, I know a place where that is going to be performed. So I want us to look at each word. Wonderful. Counselor. Think about what these words meant when they were heard. When I think about them, they carry significant power in my life. They stir my soul in a way that other words just don't. And each one reminds me of Christ in a different way. When I hear the word wonderful, I hear it through the voice of my dad from one very specific moment in my life. Wonderful was not a word that my father used very often, and maybe that's why I remember this. Maybe that's why this is so cemented into my brain. It was the summer. I was in Macon, Georgia. I was in high school, and I just finished playing tennis in a tournament with a team of my friends. Nearly every player on my team was trained or coached by my father. Now, my dad loved tennis more than anybody else I've ever known in my life. Some people spend their lives saving up money to buy that dream car. My dad spent his life saving up money to buy the dream tennis court that he would somehow stick in the backyard. I literally have no memories. No memories where I didn't already know how to play tennis. And my dad must have taught this to me when I first learned to walk. And so, in this moment, on that day in Macon, Georgia, as I was walking off the tennis court, on this day, my dad was sick, very sick. I've shared with you before that my dad had cancer. And the cancer in his body had long since, by that point, affected how he looked from the outside, affected how he walked. And I remember at the end of that tournament, as he was watching a team of players that he had spent years teaching and training, he taught us all how to play. He walked with me off the court to the clubhouse. And in that moment, he asked me to do something new, something scary, to put my arm around him as we walked. I was a teenager. Like many teens, I was embarrassed to be seen so close to my dad, to my parents. But I did it anyway. And I remember waiting for my dad to say something as we awkwardly walked up the sidewalk. I just watched him look around. I watched him look at all the people playing tennis, at me, at the court, at the coaching, at the other players that he taught how to play. And I look back now, I know that he wouldn't live very long after that moment. And I realized what my dad was doing. He was trying to hold on, to seize that moment, to remember it, to lock it down in his memory. Watching his boys play a game that he loved, that he taught. Walking around the tennis courts with his son, whose arm was breaking. And finally, my dad spoke. Only one word, repeated over and over again as we walked. Wonder. Wonder. It was as if that one word described what could not be described. Described a moment that was beyond words. That's how Isaiah uses the word wonderful here. It was not wonderful like we use it flippantly about something positive, like we're having wonderful weather, or that taco was wonderful. It's not like that. The word that Isaiah uses means undefined. It means that it can't be comprehended. It literally means miracle. And it's used at other points in the Bible when God talks about how God will free his people from slavery. God is speaking through a burning bush to Moses. And when he talks about these deeds of power, God doesn't call them miracles. God calls them wonders. That's what wonderful means. So when Isaiah says that God's going to send a child who we call Wonderful Counselor, he means that this child is someone who counsels with a power so large it's impossible to imagine, whose very advice and counsel will be a miracle unto itself. At this time, counselors were people who listened, who provided advice. Wise folks, experienced folks. Counselors were sought out when large decisions had to be made, when battles had to be fought. Counselors were trusted, listening, and helping lead people toward God's will. They led and they guided. When I hear the word counselor, especially wonderful counselor, there's a single image, just like that word wonderful, that is just seared into my brain. It shares with me what this really looks like, what this kind of counselor is. I want to share this with you. When I think of counselor, I don't think of therapist. I don't think of what I do, counseling people who are struggling. I think about what I used to be. For a long time, 5 years, I was a camp counselor. That's the kind of counselor I hear when I hear this scripture. A camp counselor for summer camp for kids with special medical needs. Every week, the medical needs differ. My job stays the same. I worked with a lot of counselors over those years. I saw a lot of them. I wouldn't call most of them wonderful, but they're good people. But come on, indefinably, amazingly, miraculously wonderful. It's a little much. Until one day. Always starts out that way. Until one day. I was sitting on a lifeguard stand watching the pool. And that's right, I'm also a lifeguard. One of my many important skills that is very useful in church life. I mean, I do suppose we have a baptismal, so maybe I can use my lifeguarding skill at some point. But I'm sitting there lifeguarding, and this is what I hear. I hear the same thing every day, this chorus, because the way they built the camp, they put the bike path right behind the lifeguard chair. So as I'm watching kids, this is what I hear behind me. Turning right, turning right, turning right. Turning right, turning right, and you can get the picture just again and again. And here's why this is what I heard. I also taught mountain biking. So there you go. Non-marketable skill number 2 in church life. When you taught mountain biking at this particular camp, it worked this way. You'd have a counselor in the front, and you'd have everybody in a straight line. And all the kids, one by one, in a straight line behind that counselor, and then you had a counselor at the end. And the counselor at the front would announce what they were about to do next. And every kid down the line had to repeat it so that we made sure that everybody paid attention. This is really important when you work at hemophilia camp. Very, very, very important. And so that's what we did. And so I would hear, turning right, turning right, turning right, or snake, snake, snake. It was Georgia. So that was also a word you hear. But this one day, that's not what I heard. I'll share with you what I heard from the lifeguard stand. I heard, all right, at about 8 feet, we're going to be turning right. So go ahead and get ready. Pedal a little bit faster. You're doing good. All right, you're getting close to me. Go a little bit to the left. Very good, very good. You're awesome. You're doing it. You're doing it. Now a little more this way. Good job. Slow down, slow down. Great job. Great job. You are doing it. That's very different from turning right over and over again. I know I'm supposed to be watching the kids, but I have to quickly see what's happening. And this quick image of what I saw was powerful. What I saw was a kid riding a bike, very slowly and kind of haphazardly. There was a counselor in front of him, and 3 other counselors on foot, running beside his bicycle. And they were all talking all at the same time, this constant commotion of speech. And I realized what they were doing. They were teaching this kid how to ride a bike. This kid had never ridden one before, and I thought, well, that's special. And then I realized which kid it was and exactly how special this was. How wonderful these counselors were. This kid had never ridden a bike before and was probably told he never would because this kid was blind. Blind. And so right then and there, in that quick moment watching him, I get to see his smile on his face as he was doing something that he never dreamed he would do. That's what a wonderful counselor looks like. That's what a wonderful counselor Christ is. Friend, running beside us, leading us, encouraging us as we do something that's unknown. A wonderful counselor is one that listens, really listens. Somebody who understands what you're going through and struggling with. They're not afraid to do those things with you. Someone who knows that his counsel is going to require a lot from us, but believes that we are able. That's a wonderful counselor, but Christ is more wonderful than that. He doesn't just empathize with our pain. He knows what our pain feels like. He's someone who doesn't always provide easy answers or the answers we want to hear. And sometimes his answers provide us with different and maybe better questions to ask. He doesn't demand that you earn his wisdom. He does not keep office hours and expect you to come to him. A wonderful counselor comes to you. A wonderful counselor notices when you're sitting by yourself. Notices when a longing in your heart seems impossible. And comes to you. All that is asked of us is to listen. To listen to that wonderful counselor. To allow ourselves to be counseled by a wonderful counselor. When I think about the people that Isaiah is speaking to and the struggles on their hearts in that moment, when I think about us and the struggles on our heart, that's the kind of person we need. The kind of hope we need. And there's nothing that embodies that hope more than the birth of a child. A newborn is the living embodiment of our hope for a better future. They are. We look at them and we see only possibilities. When they curl their tiny little hand around our finger, we know that those little hands hold unlimited potential. They're pure, holy. Newborns are also the ultimate example of how much trust and hope God has in us. That we'll raise that kid and teach and mentor them as they grow. This is a hope we understand. We've seen little babies before. But Isaiah makes it way bigger. This child, he says, will lead us, will counsel us with a wisdom that is incomprehensible. This child will walk beside us, show us the way, even when we can't see it. This child will put his arm around us when we're weary. And in that moment, the only word that we'll be able to say is wonder. Amen. We'll take a seat for our benediction this morning. Now I realize that when Isaiah said this to the people, they were not looking 800 years into the future. They could not see what we see. They didn't hear the name Wonderful Counselor, find comfort and hope in the fact that the embodiment of this name wouldn't be born for hundreds of years. They didn't know the name Jesus. They wanted a sign right then because they were struggling right then. And so do we. So I want to share with you something that blew my mind as we enter into Advent today. I want you to look. It's in your call to worship. You can look if you don't believe me. Look at how Isaiah words this prophecy. He doesn't talk about the future. He talks about the past. He says, for a child has been born to us. He's speaking in what's known as the prophetic past tense. That's what the rabbis have called it for hundreds of years. The prophetic past tense. What this means is when a prophet is so certain that something is going to happen in the future that we might as well talk about it as if it already has. That's what Advent should be. We know what's going in this nativity. We know that that's coming in 4 weeks. And it is so certain that we need to think about it and talk about it as if it has already happened in our life. So when you leave this place, don't leave waiting for Jesus to come, but recognize that that coming has already happened, that He's always been present, and that wonderful counselor is counseling you right now. Amen.